Hello, and welcome to the INRIS Files. Thoughts on, well, what is the thoughts on? Culture, history, and the human condition from a very specific Generation X point of view. Also, thoughts on storytelling, if you haven't noticed. Stories and storytelling. I've been building up for a little while up to some bigger stories that are concerning me about the state of the world today. However, when I approached one of these more serious topics during my last live stream, nobody saw it. The live stream didn't go anywhere. And I think it's entirely possible that that a lot of that falls on me. In the description that I had made for the video, and I had uploaded the description knowing full well what I was going to be talking about. I gave a synopsis of what I was going to be talking about, just like I did for this video. But I used some words that were, in retrospect, unwise to use. I've noticed a lot of videos on YouTube lately where the people who are talking about whatever it is they're talking about, especially when they are talking about sensitive subjects, end up, uh, uh, sorry, was looking at the comments as they're being typed in. Um, there are a lot of YouTubers who, when they're talking about serious subjects, are substituting some words for other words. And the substitutions don't always make sense, but you always know what they're talking about. Sometimes they'll use euphemisms, sometimes they will use words that rhyme with the words they're trying to say, and or that have some other variation on the word that they're trying to say, such that you actually know what they're getting at. What you don't have is them actually saying the words. I should have realized that by putting some of those words in my description, I was probably going to trip an algorithm. Didn't occur to me, and it also didn't occur to me that a live stream could be interrupted, not just not saved for later review or later viewing, but also not even broadcast at all. I do believe that YouTube has a copy of this video somewhere in its archives, in its vaults, deep down in the ground, but won't let me download it, so that video is lost. This is a learning opportunity for me. One of the things I am learning is something that I saw somebody else express in another video, and that was if you don't own your platform, you're only renting, and you stay on that platform merely at the discretion of the landlord. And what this means in very practical terms is I need to record my broadcasts as I make them so that I have the recordings. If I rely upon YouTube or any other platform to hold on to the recordings for me, anything could end up turning it off at any time. And we do know sometimes there are people who don't want your message to get out. Freedom of speech for them doesn't mean freedom to speak. It means freedom from speech. Freedom to not have to hear what you might say that might challenge them. This is actually a point that is brought up in the novel The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. Handmaid's Tale, and this is another one of those dystopian political science fiction novels that I had alluded to in another video where I was talking about 1984. The Handmaid's Tale presents an alternate sort of future where the United States undergoes a terrible social catastrophe, a civil war, and as society shakes up, some of the ramifications include the imposition of a religious order on the population itself. And that means the restriction of a lot of rights that we currently take for granted. One of the main characters says in that book, you have to understand that the United States, as it was previously constituted in general, was freedom to. Now what we have is freedom from. And don't make any mistake about it. Both freedoms have their advantages, just as both freedoms, or both kinds of freedom, have their disadvantages. I think it's one of the most powerful messages she has in the book. And it gives some insight into what the motives can be for people who may or may not have what they consider to be the best of intentions, but the result isn't necessarily what they had envisioned. There's this whole law of unintended consequences. The people who had imposed this new rule, this new kind of order on the United States, didn't anticipate that it would restrict them as much as it would restrict everybody else. And this is a point that is made well into the novel and very effectively. Robert A. Heinlein, another science fiction author from a little bit further back in the day, had an axiom that I think is really worth keeping in mind, and that is, of all of the great calamities that have ever been perpetrated in human history, the one phrase that sums up almost all of them is, "It seemed like a good idea at the time." I think that this is true. Now, that said, I am not here to give lectures. I am here to tell stories, and I am here to make observations, and I am here to engage with you and hope that you will engage with the stories. If you have a story that that reveals that the observations that I'm making don't always hold water, please share those stories. I want to hear those stories. I think the human race advances through meaningful communication. So, back in the day, back when the United States had a president, George W. Bush, there was a country western band called the Dixie Chicks. And they had, like many other musical acts, had made some comments during one of their concerts, essentially saying that they disagreed with the president about some of the things that he was doing. And this angered some of the fans in the audience, some of the people who heard these comments. It angered them greatly. And I know that it's been in vogue for a while for people in the United States to associate certain kinds of behavior with one political party or the other. And I will observe that as a general rule, there is no general rule. And one of those is the notion of canceling or cancel culture. And I recognize some people say, well, it's not really cancel culture, it's consequence culture, whatever. Call it whatever you want. You can change the words, just like you could change the words of the topic I had wanted to discuss before. If changing the words makes it easier to slip the message in, go for it. Nonetheless, there's a branding thing that happens where each party demonizes the other by associating their brand with something that they view as negative, something that I think most people view as negative. One of them is this idea of cancel culture. And just as many times Republicans might view Democrats as celebrating a sort of cancel culture. The Republicans engage in it too, and this is one of those examples. The Dixie Chicks had said something negative about the president. This was viewed as unpatriotic. So uh, many people who fit under that particular umbrella decided to cancel the Dixie Chicks. And it wasn't just they said in public forums that they disagreed with the Dixie Chicks. They would call radio stations and ask them to stop playing their records. They would, in whatever way they could, try to diminish the Dixie Chicks' ability to sell their music. Some of these efforts succeeded and some of them failed. But I will say they succeeded to the point where the Dixie Chicks offered an apology. And then the apology wasn't well received. It's very difficult in modern culture, and I think in a lot of cultures at a lot of stages of development, not all of them, to resist uncanceling somebody or some organization once they've been canceled. And this was a main part of the topic that I spoke about before on the live stream that disappeared, and that is this idea of there needs to be a mechanism whereby people, organizations, whatever, can atone for their perceived crimes. If you don't offer a path to atonement, all you end up doing is encouraging people to double down on whatever the perceived infraction was. And this happened with the Dixie Chicks too. The cancellation worked, not insofar as it ended their ability to make any money. It did reduce their income, but it worked in that it got them to retract their statement. They apologized. They took it all back. It didn't work. The people who had insisted that their music shouldn't be played continued to insist that their music shouldn't be played. They had been guilty of thought crime, and they must be punished in perpetuity. What ended up happening as a result of this was, after a little bit of time, the Dixie Chicks released another album, as musical acts will do, and their first single that they released was a song, "I'm Not Ready to Make Nice," and the whole message behind the whole thing was about this episode of cancellation. And so they went back to the message that they had expressed before. They didn't approve of the president, and they also didn't approve of the toxic culture that guarded against any kind of criticism. Now, again, this isn't about politics. This is about censorship. This whole story that I'm talking about right now is about censorship. And whatever political party you are, and no matter how much you do or do not demonize the other political party in the United States, both parties will try to censor whatever message they deem to be crossing the line. But what is censorship? Censorship is not what happens when a radio station refuses to play your record. Censorship is what happens when the government says that radio station is not allowed to play that record. But we enter an interesting gray area here. What happens when a company owns many radio stations, and the company decides, as a matter of policy, that they are not going to play any records by a particular artist because of a political statement that artist has made? We're now starting to confuse the marketplace of ideas, because some players get to have an outsized voice in the mix, in the marketplace. There was also a controversial situation where a baseball player at that time had uttered some racial slurs, and that baseball player was essentially censured by his team. And a lot of people said, well, the team can't tell him what to say. That's censorship. It isn't censorship. When he is speaking and he also is representing his team, and arguably professional athletes are representing their team whether they happen to be in uniform or not at any given time. So for the baseball team to say, you cannot say these things while you still represent the team, it can be perceived as a marketing necessity, just as McDonald's would be unhappy if someone in an official capacity dressed up as Ronald McDonald uh, went around and smacking kids in the playground. Not a good look. And if you're McDonald's, you see to that right away. This wasn't a good look for the team, and it wasn't a good look for the player either. And I can't remember how they censured him. I can't remember if they fined him or if they traded him to another team or what the deal was. But it was a thing that happened, and there was a little bit of an uproar in defense of the individual who made these nasty remarks and saying you can't do that, free speech. Again, this whole thing about free speech all comes up because my last live stream was disappeared. And I think it was disappeared not because of the message, but because of the words that I chose to use. And this leads us to the story, the main event for today. And it all has to do with when I was a disc jockey at WVBR. This was in the either very late 1980s or early 1990s. And I was a DJ, as I said. I had been news director previously at this radio station. I moved over to the music side. And in the meantime, though, something had happened in the news. The religious leader of Iran had heard that a British author who also happened to be raised in a Muslim family, although he himself was not a practicing Muslim, he had written a satire about, among other things, Islam. And this news got to the leader of Iran. Iran was a theocracy, as it is as of this recording. And the leader decided this cannot stand, and he issued what's called a fatwa that essentially said, you will be blessed if you assassinate the author of this book that I don't like. I would call that censorship. I think taking out somebody because he wrote a book you didn't like is about the most extreme form of censorship you can engage in. Nonetheless, pardon me. This is what the Ayatollah chose to do on this particular occasion. It's very clear, by the way. One of the problems with satire is more often than not, the people who are being ridiculed in the satire, the people who are the object of the point being made, are the ones who are least likely to understand what the point is that's being made. And if you make a satire about somebody who will kill anybody who disagrees with them, and then you decide you're going to kill that person because you view that as disagreeing with you, the height of irony has been achieved. You can't go any higher. So at this time, there was also a former rock and roll star who had been known during his performing days as Cat Stevens. I was DJ at a radio station that at that time was an AOR format, album-oriented rock. And album-oriented rock was defined as, this is going to blow your mind, rock and roll records and it could be any song on any of those albums. So you could do deep cuts, but by and large, everybody understood we were a rock and roll station. And Cat Stevens fits into the category of rock and roll as well as folk rock and a bunch of other categories, but he fits into that definition. And as a result, several of his songs were on our playlist. Cat Stevens changed his name when he converted to Islam. In fact, he changed his name to Yosef Islam. And he stopped recording. He gave up his music career. He devoted his life to his faith. And that's fine. Well, I'm not making any judgment is what I'm saying. And it didn't affect me either way. Some of his songs I liked, some of his songs I didn't like. I've actually come to appreciate his music more in the years since then. But at the time, I wasn't the biggest fan. Didn't matter. He was an artist who we played. Now, this is before the days where computers determined everything that you play. This was before the days where you could just hit a few buttons and line up all of the songs that were going to be played, and then all you had to do was speak during the talk break and then nothing else. At this particular point in time, in Air One for the radio station, we had two turntables, turntable 1 and turntable 2. We had two CD players, CD player 1, CD player 2, and we had this huge mixing board. And the mixing board not only had faders for the record players and the CD players, but also for the cart players, which is where you had a magnetic tape on an infinite loop inside a cartridge, and that magnetic loop might run for 30 seconds or a minute or 2 minutes. This is where the commercials would be recorded. So again, you didn't have a computer where you could just say, play commercial number 36. Instead, you had a cart labeled number 36. And when you got to that point on your traffic sheet, it would say, play cart number 36 during this talk break. Okay. And there you go. Whichever cart number, doesn't matter. You had all these faders, and the DJ would be, sitting here. He's got the microphone, and he's got control over the microphone where the sports guy is. He's got control over the microphone where the news person is in their own little news booth. And he also has a big library of records behind him, and a big library of CDs off to the side, and rows and rows of 4x6 cards, normal everyday pieces of paper. I'm looking around for pieces of paper, can't seem to find any. But anyway, the thing about these cards is every song had a card, and then every card had a color, and that color would correspond with the category of that song. So if a song was considered a classic, a C cut, it would be green in color, and all of the cards would have a label in the upper left-hand side. It would have the name of the song, the name of the artist, the name of the album, the time, how long the cut would go if everything was played at normal speed, and whether it had a cold ending or a fade. With all of this information, a DJ could figure out, based upon a clock that was an analog clock with a sweep hand to show you exactly where you were, but how far away you were from the top of the hour or the bottom of the hour, and you could look at it and you would do the math in your head, and you would say, oh, I've got 4 minutes and 15 seconds after this song finishes, and because I know when it's going to finish, because I know how long this song is. And now you're looking for a song at the end of the hour. It could be a classic cut, or it could be an oldie. Oldies were yellow. And so now you're going through these cards, these essentially large index cards, looking for a song that is about that length. And if it's exactly that length, you want a song that has a cold ending, because there is nothing more satisfying than playing a song that ends boom, and then you go straight into the NBC chimes, doom, 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 and then you hear the top of the hour news. That plays for 2.5 minutes, and then when that's done, you cut to the local news. That goes for however long it goes for. It depends on the time of day, and then you talk to the sports guy who has walked around and is sitting in the sports desk, and then back to the newscaster who says, "Now here's the weather." You have that carted up. You play the cart, and then back to the newscaster who says, "Okay, that's it. WVBR news time is whatever the time is, 6:07." And then the name of the newscaster, and then the DJ can come on and introduce the next song, or they can go straight into the next song. So, this is everything you need to know about Air One for the radio station. If a song is in the top 40, you've got brightly colored cards that again all have these labels on them, and you have a pie chart that shows what kind of cut you play at what time in the hour, right? So it's a pie chart, and you've got the news is the first sliver on this clock, and then after that you're going to play a G cut. G is golden. G is the sort of song that when you start to hear that song, you cannot change your radio station. You hear the beginning of American Pie, and since you love classic rock, you're listening to a classic rock radio station. You can't interrupt American Pie. Of course, you're going to continue listening. Believe me, programming is really scientifically done. I don't think it's as effective today as it was back in the day, because people who are trapped in their cars on their commute to and from work have far more options than just listening to the radio. They've got the CD players, they've got the Bluetooth players. But at this particular time in history, whether they had a cassette player in their car or not, everybody had a radio, and you would want to keep them listening to the radio for as long as possible. You think the algorithm is just invented recently by social media. The algorithm has been around by many different names for a very long time. I've told you all of that to tell you this. Cat Stevens was considered oldies at this point. Maybe some of his songs were classics. Oldies were essentially anything that we would play from roughly the mid 60s to somewhere around 1972. Anything after 1972 up through the early 80s could be called classics. And then we had other categories for other songs that would fit the format. Cat Stevens, again, I think most of his cards were yellow. I could be mistaken. And as I mentioned, the top 40, well, there's only 40 cards. And so and the way you had a different pie chart for every hour of the day. So this would allow you in the morning shift, you didn't have as many top 40 songs. You had mostly songs that had already been proven to be the sort of things that people would listen to. Later on in the day, you would start playing more of the top 40 songs. But everything was set up so that if, like for a top 40 song, if the card is in front for that group, right, you had your heavy rotation and your medium, your light, and your new cuts. Anything that was in front, you had to play that song at that point in the hour. But with the oldies, you had a big array of cards, and you could go through until you found a card of a song that was the right length. Or let's face it, you could go through until you found a song that fit what you were already playing. You could go through and you could pick a song on the basis of, did you like this artist? As I mentioned, I wasn't a huge fan of Cat Stevens, but if Cat Stevens' song came up and it was the right time, right length, all right, I'll play it. No big deal. But then The Ayatollah of Iran had issued a fatwa saying essentially it's okay to kill the author of this book that was a satire. And Yosef Islam was on a British chat show, and you can look this up on YouTube. These videos still exists. And there's about 8 people around in a circle, and they're talking about the events of the day, and they get to how the Ayatollah of Iran had issued this fatwa. Do you think this is a good idea? And we get to Yosef Islam, and he says, well, while I would not personally do it myself, I can completely understand why a Muslim would feel that it's appropriate, and yeah, it totally makes sense that he would carry through what the fatwa tells him to do. The long and the short of it is, there is no way to listen to that interview and not come away with it with the understanding that Yosef Islam was condoning the murder of an artist because of what the message was that the artist was conveying. I had a little bit of a problem with that, personally, as somebody who has written many stories, many of which have been, published, many of which have not, even more of which have not. As somebody who has written and recorded some music, as somebody who knows many, many artists and all the rest of this, and who has always been a proponent of what we in the United States have enshrined in the First Amendment of our Constitution, that the government shall make no laws abridging the freedom of speech, the marketplace of ideas. And yes, naturally, we were supposed to, it was sort of understood that anybody who believed in freedom of speech would naturally be repulsed by this idea that a religious leader who was also a governmental leader would call for the execution of somebody who created art that he didn't like. So I'm a DJ, and I'm going through the cuts, oldies, right? And there's a Cat Stevens song. Now, it came up in a reasonable number of cards that it would be a song that I would have played or could have played during my shift. But man, I am just not. I feel funny giving a platform to a guy who would deprive somebody of their life for what they would do if they had a platform, publishing. So I would move his card to the back, right? You would pull out a card, you would play that song, and then you would put it in the back so that it would eventually move its way back to the front of the queue. And in this way, you didn't hear the same song more than once every few weeks. If it was an oldie, if it was a classic, might be more than once any 2.5 weeks, that kind of thing. So I treated it as if, well, it came up during my shift, and it's the same as if I played it because it came up during my shift. And so I'm putting it in the back, even though I'm not playing it. I'm sure the music director would not have been happy if he knew that I was doing that, but people were doing that all the time. That doesn't necessarily justify what I did. But this was me making the decision that I would not be the curator of our platform and allow this particular messenger to be heard during my segment of the show, of the day. Any other DJ could make any other decision that they wanted. If the station had decided to pull an artist because we decided that, again, as a policy, right? The music director of the radio station decides we're not going to play this artist anymore because we don't want this artist to have we don't want to have this artist's message associated with our station. So we're not going to play that artist. It seems to me that's reasonable. It seems to me there's a difference between a radio station choosing not to play a song and the government saying you're not allowed to play that song. And it's reasonable for a baseball team. It's reasonable for any number of organizations to say, or people, individuals, to say, I am not going to be affiliated with this messenger because of some message that they have given that they are associated with, and we don't want that message associated with us. That's not censorship. Because if you look at it the other way, if you say, okay, you're not allowed to not play that song, then what you're saying is you have to play this song. That's a different form of control over the marketplace of ideas. If you say, all right, if you're a country station, you have to play this artist. That makes no sense. So this was my protest. I don't think I was censoring Cat Stevens. Rather, I was just diminishing the volume of his voice when I was curating our platform, which in this case was a radio station. However, I was also host of a comedy show on the weekends. And this comedy show, we would occasionally record promos that would be played throughout the week. Be sure to tune in Saturday night at 11 p.m. to A Night at the Asylum, where we will be giving a salute to whatever the topic would be. One time we decided to announce ahead of time that we were going to give a salute to religion. Big mistake. I should have known better. This was my opportunity to find out. If you say you're going to be playing comedy where the object of the comedy is religion, you got to be prepared for some people are not going to like that. And the radio station got a call. I happened to be the one who took the call, and the person was calling about the promo that they had just heard on the air, saying that the comedy show was going to be playing comedy about religion this coming weekend. And the person said in a very matter-of-fact tone, look, I'm not saying anything and I'm not telling you what to do, but you should be aware that a radio station in Arizona, and by the way, I don't remember what state it actually was. Let's just say for the sake of argument, this radio station in Arizona played material that made fun of the Holy Prophet of Islam, and then some members of the listening community who didn't like that wrapped chains around the exit doors and then threw a Molotov cocktail into the building, setting the building on fire. Now, this person said this in a very matter-of-fact tone, and when the call was over, I wasn't really sure whether this was somebody just letting me know so that I could be aware that it was possible that this could happen in our community, or if this person was actually making a threat. I don't know. Didn't know then, don't know now, doesn't matter. This is different. This is not the same as calling up a radio station and saying, I don't like this song. I don't like this artist. Please don't play this song again. Please don't play this artist again. This was a case of a threat of potential violence if we played the material that they didn't like. So I didn't play the material that could possibly offend. And on that particular show, I did a show that was making fun of other things. And when I say making fun of, I mean comedy that was around a certain theme. I waited a couple of weeks, and then I did the show that was themed on religion. I just didn't front sell it. I didn't create a promo for it first. And therefore, the people who wouldn't have listened to the show anyway didn't hear the thing that they didn't want to listen to anyway. It's kind of like if you don't want to read satire about your religion written by a person who doesn't practice your religion anymore, but is intimately familiar with it, you don't buy the book. You don't threaten the bookstore or the library or the author. But if you're somebody who's not inclined to read those sorts of books anyway, then the bookstore doesn't really have to worry, because as a general rule, this person isn't going to even know that the book is on the shelf. It only matters when somebody points it out to the religious leader who has a little bit of a temper. Anyway, it was something that has obviously provided me food for thought ever since then, in terms of the marketplace of ideas. Sometimes you need to say things that are unpopular. Sometimes you need to stand up for a principle that you consider to be that important, even at the risk of upsetting other people. And where the marketplace of ideas is supposed to be preserved, people are supposed to, they can respond with displeasure, but they can't take action that violates your other rights, like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So I have these thoughts about censorship on the occasion where one of my videos disappeared, not because anybody necessarily disagreed with what I said, but because I happened to use words that tripped an algorithm that caused the video to not play. That's on me. YouTube has the right to decide what videos they allow on their platform, just like a radio station has a right to decide what songs it's going to play. And I very much believe in that right. I think YouTube should not be required to show something just because somebody recorded it and said, here, you have to show this. So I know better. Next time I decide I am going to talk about this topic, and I will, I'm going to choose my words a little more carefully about how I promo it. And I'm also going to choose my words carefully while I discuss it during the broadcast. Because the goal of my broadcast is not to upset people, it's to get people to think. I do realize for some people, thinking can be upsetting. And this is the nature of things. I believe that I will end up finding an audience of people who like to hear stories, like to tell stories, and like to think. So hopefully I'm right. If you decide that you would like to talk about the issues that I'm talking about here, please do so in the comments. And please be respectful when you do, and realize that some people might disagree with you, and that's okay. More people might actually agree with you. You never know. But anyway, that's my story for today, my food for thought. I hope that it gives you something to think about, and I hope you'll tune in again. Who knows? You might even get to hear what the algorithm wouldn't let you hear the last time I tried to do a live stream. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing each other again. Cheers.